Hello, this is Linda, and I'm with
Gonzo.
and today on Be the Expert, we are going to be talking to you about honeybees.
Honeybees. Hello, folks. On this first slide, I just wanted to introduce honeybees and their classification in the world. So they belong to the Animalia kingdom, the Arthropoda phylum, the class of Insecta, and the order of Hymenoptera. They belong to the family Apidae, the genus Apis, and the species that we're going to be talking about in particular are Mellifera. Here on this slide, we have the life cycle of a honeybee. Just like mosquitoes, they go through complete metamorphosis, going from egg larvae to pupae and then adulthood, with worker bees lasting anywhere from 30 to 60 days, depending on the environmental conditions that they're in. Queens can last up to 5 years, with drone bees lasting as long as they can until they mate with the queen. Now here we're looking at the honeybee anatomy. The anatomy of a worker bee. You have the head, thorax, and abdomen. The head holds the sensory parts. The thorax has the locomotive parts, and the abdomen has the internal organs or reproductive parts of an insect, and also the stinger. Honeybees can be found in natural or domesticated environments. Honeybees live in forests, deserts, meadows, gardens, and parks, and can occupy abandoned dwellings. Honeybees favor areas with flowering plants and water sources. Honeybees prefer to establish nests in voids or structures where they are safe from predators. So here we have an example of a hidden hive at a park in Cathedral City. And like I mentioned earlier, they prefer to set up their hives in voids or crevices or sections where they can't be disturbed by predators. So it's typical to see them in water meters across the valley. So here we have another example of where bees might establish their hives. This is the old beehive on a tree example. You can see here that the hive is very extensive and must have been up in that tree for a long time before it was cut down. So let's look at their social structure. Honeybees are a very social group. They have a hive with a queen. It's made up of drone bees and worker bees, as well as larvae or immature honeybees. The hive is constructed out of wax by the worker bees, and there are multiple hexagon-shaped chambers used to store larvae and food, and honey is a secretion from the waxy buildup of the comb. Queens, usually made up from consuming royal jelly at the immature stage, and their role is to expand the colony. Drones are male bees, and their sole purpose is to mate with the queen or new queens. When they fertilize eggs, those eggs become additional worker female bees, while non-fertilized eggs become drones. Worker bees are the backbone of the whole colony. They serve the need of the colony. They expand the hive by building multiple chambers. They forage out for nectar. They take care of the immature bees, and they protect the hive when threatened. Worker bees may not become queens, but if the current queen dies, they will select a new queen from one of the immature larvae by feeding it royal jelly. Honeybees have a beneficial role in nature because they are pollinators of various crops and plants around the world. Almonds, strawberries, and soybeans are industries that thrive from honeybee pollination. Honeybees pollinating flowers transfer materials between male and female plants or flowers that allow for fruit development.
Gonzo, thank you for that plethora of information. Beekeeping makes for a wonderful hobby that's enjoyable, it's educational, and it supports the depleting bee population. It gives an opportunity for you to do something wonderful to connect with nature. Beehives can be found in natural settings such as the hollow of this tree. However, beekeepers use man-made hives to house their bees. There are two main systems. The Langstroth beehive is the most commonly used. It's composed of boxes that are stacked on top of each other, as you can see in the photo. Each of those boxes contains frames where the bees build their combs and store their honey. You pull the boxes out like a drawer to access the bees, harvest the honey, and perform maintenance. The other one is the top bar, where the bee frames are arranged horizontally, not vertically. Each bar containing comb and honey is pulled up and out of the beehive from the top. Hive placement is important. Hives should be in a quiet area, away from neighboring properties, away from roads and pedestrian traffic. Here you see a placement in an agricultural setting. This photo shows an example of a more residential setting. This is an example of a small Langstroth beehive. This backyard beehive is a simple solution for the novice beekeeper. Regardless if you are in a rural or urban setting, it is always a good idea to let your neighbors know about a hive to avoid future problems. The main diet of an adult honeybee is nectar and pollen. Bees collect nectar because it is an essential food source for the colony. Nectar provides the carbohydrates needed for bees to perform daily tasks. It is a high sugar liquid that plants produce. If you touch the center of a flower and you get wet or sticky, you probably found the nectar. Pollen is what makes you sneeze in the summertime. Pollen is usually a yellow color, but sometimes it can be almost a green or a gray. Pollen is that powdery substance in the center surrounded by petals. Bees collect pollen to feed to the immature bees inside their nest. Bees need a good source of water throughout the year. Setting out a dish or a bird bath with marbles or even rocks will allow them to drink without drowning. It is imperative that bees always have a good, reliable water source. Additionally, beekeepers give their bees sugar water if they have consumed all of their honey and if flowers have not started to bloom. It is not the best and it doesn't have everything a bee needs to stay healthy, but it will keep them alive until they can get their nectar. Bee kits can be purchased at a Tractor Supply store, Amazon, or several other online sites. A well-stocked starter kit will cost about $600. Before you purchase bees or equipment, you should check to see if there are any community, city, county, or state laws that need to be followed. A local or regional bee club may be your best source for getting that information. They may already know about the rules and regulations in your area. At the end of this presentation, there will be some helpful links.
Thank you for that information, Linda. Unfortunately, not every interaction with bees is a pleasant one. So sometimes we have incidences that generate service requests for us to investigate. When there is an incident involving bees, typically we will get called. We'll screen the calls to find out if the bee situation is in a public domain or private domain area. We will respond to public areas, but areas that are private, we will have the customer contact a bee removal expert or pest control company. So the reason why we service bees in public areas is because there's a percentage of the public that are allergic to honeybee stings. And if they're stung, they can go under anaphylactic shock, which may cause death. So some things you can do if you're stung is to immediately relocate yourself from the area, remove stingers by using a card, do not use tweezers that may enhance the sting, seek medical attention, and use an EpiPen if you're allergic. Do not scratch at the sting afterwards because they might cause secondary infection. The difference between European and Africanized honeybees are their social behavior within their surroundings. Africanized honeybees are prone to attack in greater numbers when disturbed or challenged, and they will pursue threats for longer distances and stay alert longer outside of their hive. European honeybees are less prone to attack or may only sting in defense. Africanized honeybees are a hybrid species. There's no physical differences between the two, and Africanized honeybees tend to swarm more often to establish new colonies. When responding to service requests, the first thing a technician wants to do is suit up for safety. So you're going to wear a bee suit that typically involves a headpiece, a full body piece, and a set of gloves that go around the body to protect you from potentially being stung if the hive becomes aggressive. So when we're responding to a bee call, one of the first things we want to do is identify whether the bees are a swarm or a colony. A swarm is a group of bees relocating the new queen from one area to another, and they can typically set themselves up for 2 or 3 days on a tree branch, at a light post, somewhere that's just within their flight range before they actually establish themselves to set up a hive. Versus a colony is going to be an established area where the worker bees have started to build the hive and expand the chambers and they have their queens set in. So if it's a swarm, we could just respond to the person who made the call to give them some time before the bees just leave. And if it's a colony, then we'll have to figure how to control and remove the colony in a safe manner. So I'd like to take this time to just challenge you and have a look at the picture and ask, okay, do you guys think that this is a swarm or is it a colony? Surprise, surprise, long story short, this turned out to be a hive. And when it was a bee call I had responded to a couple years ago, and when I first saw it, I thought it was just a, a swarm coming through. They had bees moving the territory, pedestrians were being stung, so I thought maybe someone had disturbed them and they were just kind of doing their thing. But after spending some time, I noticed parts of the hive. So at this point, we had to call in private pest control. If the colony is in a public area, or when we've responded to colonies that are in public areas such as a park or a school, we will use caution tape and maybe some cones to block the area off to keep pedestrians from wandering too close to the beehive so they don't get stung. We'll communicate with the resident or the person who called in the bee service request so we know we've identified what it is and what we're going to do next. And then we'll plan for the treatment, if not the same day, the next day, by understanding where we're going to spray from and what we're going to need to cut out the beehive. So when we're conducting our control efforts, the preferred product to use is called Empede. This is an insecticide, a fungicide, and miticide product. It's insecticidal soap. The active ingredient is potassium of fatty acids. We use it at a rate of 2% for 100 gallons. So that would be 2 gallons of actual control product mixed in with 98 gallons of water for a 100-gallon batch. It is a single word warning, so it's a category 2 insecticide. And the way this works is when we make our mix, you have to use a boom sprayer, something where you can have a cone shape spray so that the droplets come in contact with your target pest. And when you're controlling bees, most of them are congregated around the hive, but the worker bees tend to fly out of sight and come back. And so you're having to put your product down on the hive, open up the fan so that you can get some of the flying bees, and then have moments where you pause to allow some of those bees to come back, and then you spray the hive again. You want to spray it to the point where it's wet, but you don't have a lot of runoff, because you don't want to have secondary pests that are not target pests be hit with this control product. When you're making your application, what the NPEAT is going to do is it's going to block off the pores that allow the target pest to breathe. So you're going to suffocate them. That's going to be the primary mode of action. The secondary mode of action is that product is going to dry out their exoskeleton. And so it's a two-part control method or mode of action that occurs when you're applying NPEAT to soft body insects, and in this case, honeybees. After some time of applying the product, you'll see the bees knocked down in this fashion around the hive. And at this moment, you should cut your machine off to record your usage and then collect your cleaning items to clean the territory. So cleanup is the last step when working on bee removal, and it's one of the most important parts of the service request. You want to remove the hive using tools like a paint scraper, chisel, a knife, a saw, anything sharp and flat that'll help you cut away at the waxy buildup. And you want to get rid of the hive so that you don't have reinfestation from another bee colony or rodents or cockroaches that might get into where the beehive was set up, because that'll just cause other infestation of pests. Also, removing the dead bees is important because they were hit with product. You don't want like a predator to come and eat up the dead bees so they don't have an exposure to that product. Or you don't want kids or pets to kind of come into contact with the dead bees. So cleaning the area is very critical. And after doing so, you can complete the service request. So this concludes our discussion on honeybees. Linda and I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And we have here our resources where we got the majority of our information. If you'd like to read up on anything yourself, you're welcome to.
And we'd like to thank Kim for all of her help as well.
Yes, thank you, Kim, for the guidance and the information. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat. And we'll be back next year for honeybees.
Beekeeping.
Part 2.
Part 2.
Beekeeping and honeybees, part 2.
Beekeeping.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.